Honorable chairpersons, commissioners, esteemed delegates, distinguished guests, and colleagues. Welcome to the last day of the International Conference on Gender Inclusion in National Human Rights Institutions. Can I have your attention, please? I welcome you all to the last day of this conference. Over the last 2 days, we have engaged in meaningful discussions and insightful presentations exploring how the national human rights institutions can enhance gender equality within their internal structures and in their external work. So as we begin our final day, we turn our attention to a topic that is both timely and urgent: climate change and gender justice. This panel discussion aims to unpack the impact of climate change on the rights of girls and women and explore the crucial role of the NHRIs in the Asia-Pacific region in advocating for climate justice on a global stage. This session will be chaired by Honorable Professor Dr. Surya Dhungel, the Commissioner of the NHRC Nepal. The session will be facilitated by Mr. Bhusan Tuladhar, the Chief of Party at USAID Clean Air Project. Joining us as panelists are Ms. Srijana Shrestha, the Undersecretary at the President Chure Conservation Program, Honorable Putu Elvina, the Commissioner of Indonesian National Commission on Human Rights, and Honorable Aminath Razak, the Commissioner of the Human Rights Commission of Maldives. I welcome all the speakers on stage to begin the discussion.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. We're ready for the first session of the final day, which also happens to be the final session, technical session of this conference. And I'm sure you're a little bit tired after 2 days of intensive discussions, but we hope that this will wake you up as well. It's going to be a call for action on climate, an issue that everybody is concerned about, everybody should be concerned about, and particularly when we're talking about gender, we should be concerned about. And to discuss this, we have an excellent panel here. First, I'd like to introduce the chair of this session, Honorable Professor Dr. Surya Dhungel, who is a commissioner for National Human Rights Commission in Nepal. But I've known him more as an activist for environmental rights from a long time ago. He was involved in raising the voices of the people, shaking up the judiciary on these issues. So thank you, Dr. Dhungel. We also have, thank you. We also have 3 panelists here. First, I'd like to introduce you to Honorable Putu Elvina, who is a commissioner at the Indonesian National Commission on Human Rights. She is a commissioner for Education and Extension, National Human Rights Commission of Indonesia, also known as Komnas HAM. Komnas HAM, thank you. She holds a master's in management from Batam International University. She served as a human resource officer and also holds position of HR consultants. She also has experience working in human resource at Executive Banyan Tree, Bintan. And more importantly, she has worked as a member of the Regional Indonesian Child Protection Commission and of the Riau Island Province for 2 terms, 2007 to 2014. She has extensive experience for working as a member of the Central Indonesian Child Protection Commission for 2 terms. Thank you very much, and thank you for your work in for child protection area. We also have, from Nepal, we have Srijana Shrestha. Ms. Srijana Shrestha is an undersecretary at the Ministry of Forest and Environment and assigned to work at the President Chure Tarai Madhes Conservation Development Board. The Chure region is one of the most sensitive regions when it comes to climate change and environmental issues. She is leading the Research Technology Division and Social Mobilization section for the President Chure Tarai Madhes Conservation Development Board. She has extensive experience of working in the field of forestry, gender, and climate change. Her major responsibilities are to coordinate and conduct research and review reports, prepare plans and programs, and formally she was also associated with, in preparation of the National Emission Reduction Program document formulation of the National Climate Change Policy. So she has a lot of experience on climate issues and also working on natural resource management. As I said, the Chure area is a very important area for us that provides natural resources, water, and so on for about half the population that lives downstream from there. Next, we have as panelist, where did I go? Just a minute, please. Honorable Amina Shifat Abdat Razak. Honorable Amina Shifat is a commissioner at the Human Rights Commission for the Maldives. Ms. Shifat served at RCM as an acting Secretary General for a brief period. She also served as the Director for Research and Monitoring Department of RCM. And Ms. Shifat was responsible to oversee and guide research work, planning, conducting human rights-based research, providing guidance and research staff, and facilitate work on research partners and consultants. She was also responsible for guiding the monitoring work, planning, and implementation of systematic monitoring of human rights situation and the state's compliance to human rights obligations, reporting to UN Human Rights Mechanism and Parliament. But more importantly, she has served as a member of the branch board governance of the Maldivian Red Crescent, Mali branch from April 2016 to 2017, and Ms. Shifat was also the focal person for branch for child protection, violence prevention, gender equity, and human rights. She has extensive work experience for working with the Maldivian Red Crescent and various other organizations. I think this is very useful for us when we talk about climate change, because a lot of times when we talk about climate change, we're talking about disasters and how women and children are involved with this. So thank you very much, Ms. Shifat. It's a pleasure having all of you in this panel. And now I'd like to begin the panel discussion, but before that, I'd like to request our chair to set the context for this panel discussion.
Thank you, Bhushanji. On distinguished panelists, honorable members, chairpersons of various commissions, honorable members of Human Rights Commission Nepal and Secretary, and member of various commissions. I see honorable former minister also, member of parliament, and here distinguished diplomats also. And we have a very good gathering of here scholars and activists also, and representative of various human rights related civil society groups and institutions. I would like to welcome you all first. One of the good things today we have is we have a very good moderator who himself is a well-known environmentalist and actually a climate change crusader who has been working in this area almost since past almost 4 decades. So he's the chief of party now, and we are working together. Human Rights Commission is working together with him in one of the projects which is related to clean air pollution aspect. And today, since we have a very good panelist and we are discussing about climate justice and climate change and climate justice, two very important interrelated issues. When we talk about climate justice, and as the information given in the booklet itself suggests, two main focus will be on. One is unpacking the impact of climate change on women and girls, the rights of women and girls. And the second is, of course, the role of NHRIs, international, human rights institutions from all over the world will be really sharing their experiences here, Actually, gender-based, some of the topics specified there, is gender-based violation, impact on which our moderator will be sharing first here with the respective our colleagues. I would simply like to request, in addition to the whatever has been mentioned, which our moderator will be definitely elaborating, the focus on international instruments and its applicability in the respective countries. How far those international commitments and instruments have been helpful in addressing the issues of climate change in the respective countries. Actually, that's very important. That's where the role of NHRs comes. I remember in February this year, actually, we had a very big conference in Doha. Doha had initiated a conference. It was a collaborative conference on human rights and climate change. And most of the members of the national institutions had participated in that. And that, starting from that, actually the UN OSCHR and GANARI, Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions, had lately started intervening in the area of climate change. And linking climate change, environment, and human rights is a very complex, task. And Human Rights Watch, Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and General Assembly and Human Rights Council now onwards have been really focusing on this issue. Therefore, we have to keep that into mind, that international commitments are very important for all of us, because recently, in 2022, when the General Assembly, the report of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and the Secretary General was presented at the General Assembly, the focus on climate change from vulnerable groups' perspective was very much highlighted. So, what is the impact of climate change on not only women and child or girls, but on all vulnerable groups, including indigenous community and even based on remote areas, people living in remote areas, and people of diverse and very marginalized groups of the community. Actually, that has to be given priority according to the commitment that has been made internationally. And now, I think based on that, I would request the panelists actually, which certainly the moderators will point out, because the UN framework for United Nations, framework for climate change in the context of Paris Agreement, which is there, the framework, and the concerned countries, the presentation of their nationally determined communications is very important. What does the government say? What are the strategy of the government? Although in the Nepalese context, our colleague, Sirjana Ulji will definitely share some of these issues, because we have in Nepal many laws have been, very updated laws, and from climate change perspective, in the participation of marginalized group, women, and in the adaptation, in developing adaptation plan has been mentioned in the law as such. But to what extent that law is implemented? One of the biggest problems all over the world is there are commitments internationally as well as nationally, but enforcement, implementation is a big problem. To what extent we are implementing that? I think that has to be really taken into consideration. And I would, at the same time, I would request the panelists to kindly suggest us as a takeaway from this conference, at least one from
Bangladesh in 90 are women. According to the UNEP, 80% of the people who are displaced because of climate change are women. 80%. And when women are displaced, they are at greater risk of violence, including sexual violence. That's not me saying it. This is a quote from Michelle Bachelet, the first woman president of Chile and former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. But today, I don't want to portray women just as victims of climate change. And we should not do that. I think they are also leaders of climate action. A lot of us talk about the Paris Declaration. Okay? The chair also mentioned it. Who was the architect behind the Paris Declaration? She was Christina Figueres, the Secretary General of the UNFCCC at that time. Right? She put all this together. She and her team, and there were a lot of people involved, but she was the leader there. And it's incredible, considering that UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, was passed in 1992. It took so many years for all our countries to come together and agree on what exactly we should do. And it took a woman leader, to get all these countries together. I'm sure it wasn't an easy job. On the civil society front, a young woman has been able to mobilize millions of people, inspire millions of people. A young woman named Greta Thunberg. As a student, high school student, she started her protest by standing alone in front of the Swedish parliament with a little sign that she made by herself. Today, millions of people follow her. She has addressed UN conferences, various important meetings, and wherever she addresses, she comes out with bold statements. She challenges the people in power, and people are forced to listen. It's not just there. Even in Nepal, we see women at the forefront of management of natural resources. Whether it's community forest user groups, it's usually women who are doing it, or water management. Back in 2017, Sonia Awale, who is now the editor of Nepali Times, again, a woman,
this wonderful conference, and of course to the UN agencies that support this event. When we talk about the climate change and gender justice, the following background is the main reason why this topic is important for us to discuss. We know that women and girls are more vulnerable to the impact of climate change, especially as they are part of the majority of the workforce and their livelihood are more dependent on natural resources that are threatened by climate change. They face social, economic, and political barriers that limit their capacity to overcome them. Women and men in rural areas in developing countries are particularly vulnerable when they are highly dependent on local natural resources for their livelihoods. Indonesia is one of the countries that is highly vulnerable to climate crisis, especially flood and extreme heat or drought. According to the National Disaster Management Agencies, during April 2023, Indonesia has experienced around 846 disasters, about 90% which were hydrometeorological disasters. And according to the climatology and geophysics agencies, Indonesia hydrometeorological disaster trend has increased over 40 years. Bank of Indonesia analyzed that economic loss due to the extreme weather reached more than 100 trillion per annum. Women's dependence on natural resources cannot be denied. Water, lands, rice, field, gardens, and agriculture and the sea are part of everyday life that are inherent in the duties of women in general situation in Indonesia, both in taking care of the household and supporting their husband work as fishermen, farmers, and others. The consequences of climate change make women indirectly responsible for securing water, food, and fuel for cooking, sanitizing, and so on. Unequal access to resources and decision-making process, limited mobility put women in rural areas in a position where they are disproportionately affected by climate change. When natural resources are disrupted due to the climate change, the natural disasters that occur can cause changes in the way they live, changing in their job, deterioration in health, and they are even more vulnerable when their partners have to migrate in other regions to find a work. It is not uncommon for various situations to lead to violence and reduce rights for women and girls to enjoy their rights. When disaster occurs, women are less likely to survive and more likely to be injured due to the long-standing gender inequalities that create disparities in information, mobility, decision-making, and access to resource and training. The impact is that women and girls find it increasingly difficult to access help and assistance, further threatening their livelihood, well-being, and recovery, and creating vicious cycles of vulnerability to the future disaster. The following diagram shows how vulnerability starts with disaster, such as drought, for example, and end with violence due to climate change impact. Although reports on the amount of loss and damage due to disaster have been issued by institutions such as the National Disaster Management Agency and Bank of Indonesia, compensation related to the impact of the climate change is not yet been implemented, like in forest fires, fish loss in water bodies, flooding, and etc. The world still under discussion about the COP27, which only established a special committee to develop a recommendation for operationalizing the loss and damage fund at COP28. Indonesia lost around 23.3 billion US dollar due to the drought. So, government of Indonesia has National Action Plan on Climate Change Adaptation in 2014, and National Development Planning Agency in 2021 released 6 books of climate resilience development policy document, and Ministry of Women Empowerment and Child Protection launched National Action Plan on Gender and Climate Change. How about then Komnas HAM respond to the situation? Based on the mandate by the law, various roles are carried out to ensure that the enjoyment of human rights due to the climate change can be minimized, and also to ensure that the recommendation can be implemented. Komnas HAM make every effort to create conditions that lead to reduced impact of climate change. Reviewing the national inquiry, the progress is slow but promising. Until December 2023, at least 2,500 171 hectares of customary forest that was legalized by Ministry of Environmental and Forestry decree. Komnas HAM already launched 13 standard and norm setting, such as land and resources right, human rights defenders, freedom of speech and expression, and access to justice, and also make public campaign and training programs on several issues. Komnas HAM also receiving complaints, conducting investigation and monitoring of cases of human rights violation related to climate change. And then Komnas HAM provide amicus curiae to human rights defenders in court for their action in defense of the environment. Collaborating with the Ministry of Environment and Forestry and other civil society organizations to accelerate the adat or customary forests in Indonesia, like in North Kalimantan and North Sumatra. Until now, Komnas HAM conduct a national inquiry, especially for indigenous people. The inquiry focused on several issues in the document as follows. The first is national inquiry of indigenous people rights in forest areas. Second is national inquiry of indigenous people's agrarian conflict over their territories in forest area. Then the national inquiry in violation of indigenous women's rights in forestry management. And last, national inquiry learning excerpt. There are many challenges, of course, because lack of policy socialization. There are not many programs or activities that specifically target gender equality due to the climate change, although the Ministry of Women Empowerment and Child Protection already launched a national action plan on gender and climate change. The last is the recommendation. We have some recommendation in the climate change to gender justice. The first is effort to address climate change, reduce greenhouse gas emission through the National Action Plan on Gender and Climate Change. There needs to be policy on the importance of the role, participation of women in the energy transition. Joint efforts are needed to realize gender equality through empowering women implementing the National Action Plan on Gender and Climate Change. Last is the involvement of stakeholders such as local government, the private sector, and civil society has to be enhanced. This slide and my presentation on the role of Komnas HAM, hopefully it will be useful. Thank you very much.
Excellent, Honorable Putu Katrilina. It is indeed very useful, and it definitely sets the context on not only what's happening in Indonesia, some of the challenges that Indonesia is facing because of climate change, but also how is the National Human Rights Commission, Komnas HAM, responding to that challenge, what it's doing, and also a set of clear recommendations. If I may ask, in that list of recommendations that you had, what would be the #1 recommendation to other human rights commissions, such as the National Human Rights Commission in Nepal or so on? What is something that you feel is the low-hanging fruit, something that needs to be done immediately?
Yes, of course, there are many advocating to make sure that there is a regulation and the regulation is implemented. Because in some areas, some countries have the good regulation regarding the climate change, but implementation is a big homework for us to do. So I think that national human rights institutions have to advocate this issue because we have a dependent issues, dependent problem to the natural resources to make sure that the climate change impact is decreasing. I think that's the advocating issues or strategies to have been implemented to this kind of the regulation must be strengthened.
Thank you. I hope everybody is listening. Number one should be advocacy for implementation of national regulations and policies. Right? A lot of our countries do have regulations, but they're not followed. Yeah. Okay. And one more question, because there were a lot of questions that came up by mind as you showed the slides and what you're doing. For example, receiving complaints and so on. Yeah. Right? What challenges do you face? Because I know there are a lot of powerful lobbies, when we talk about fossil fuel or logging in forestry and so on, right? As Human Rights Commission, do you face any challenges in that context?
Yes, of course. When we talk about the natural resources, it talk about business behind it. Mm-hmm. So when we suing that natural resources is part of human rights, and government have to protect this right, to fulfill this right. But related to business behind this issue is a big challenging. So Komnas HAM face or receive a complaint about how political person behind these issues, and it's very complicated. So in implementing and uphold the regulation or law enforcement is very difficult for us to make sure this happens.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Your first recommendation was enforce the standards and the regulations, but the second, what we just talked about is we need to put a lot of effort in that because that is challenging. There's a lot of political interests, business interests behind that as well. Let's move on to Maldives now. Maldives is a small island country, but very much affected by climate change. And what I'm impressed about Maldives and its government is that although it is a very tiny country, its voice is very strong. When it comes to international negotiations or so, it's always loud, bold, and putting its voice forward. We've seen the Maldives cabinet meeting underwater to get the message across. Some people call it a stunt, but those stunts are necessary to get the messages across. So coming from Maldives, okay, how do you see the climate change, or shall I say climate crisis, affecting your country, particularly women and children, and the work that your institution is doing there?
Yes, I think it's very important to set the context of how Maldives is, the geographical setup of Maldives is, for us to understand the climate change impact that is happening in the Maldives. We are talking about an isle of 1,192 very small islands, out of which 187 islands are inhabited. The stretch is very short. It's only 860 kilometers long. And the width actually varies between 80 to 120 kilometers, so you can actually imagine how small the nation is. And so when you fly above the Maldives, you cannot really even see it. It's just a speck of little dots that you see from above. The population of Maldives is 515,000 people. That's very less relatively to any other country. But when we look at how the population is scattered around the country, the greater Male area or the central area is very much overpopulated. And a lot of people live in the greater Male area. One reason why people migrate to the greater Male area or the central region again is also indirectly, climate change is an indirect reason for that. So when we look at the islands, how low it lies, 80% of the land area is less than 1 meter above sea level. So this is how vulnerable we are. This is how, climate change would you can actually see the stark reality of how much it will be impacted because of our geographical setup. We are impacted on different levels and in different ways. Because of global warming, the sea level is rising, causing a lot of beach erosions. There's a lot of sea surges because of global warming again, because of the temperature rising. And because of the sea surges, a lot of people who are living close to the beaches, who are inhabited closer to the shoreline, are very much affected by the salination of water. Because of the beach erosion, a lot of people, the houses that are situated at the shoreline, there are people who have to actually be relocated to other areas as well. And so a lot of people are impacted in their everyday life as well when it comes to clean water, when it comes to a decent life in the islands especially. Because of a lot of infrastructural developments, such as dredging and reclamation of land and harbor developments, this again actually impacts the soil density and a lot of other issues arise within the islands, like inside where the people are inhabited. There's also the issue of our precious reefs, the coral bleaching, the dumping of waste, being polluted, and also in Maldives there are islands that have wetlands and mangroves as well. It's only a few of the inhabited islands that have mangroves and wetlands. But due to, again, infrastructural developments, some of these mangroves and wetlands have now been reclaimed, and because of that, a lot of people's livelihood have been impacted. To give you some examples, a lot of the Maldivians, especially women, they rely on their their livelihood relies on a lot of resources that are either sourced from the wetlands or these livelihood material that they produce. It's either to some extent produced using these wetlands. So for example, when it comes to coir ropes, weaving coir ropes and weaving mats, traditional mats, the coconut husk is actually buried in the mangroves or the wetlands for a period of time. There are some resources that are taken from the mangroves and wetlands to be used in the production of traditional mats as well. But because these mangroves are either getting salinated or because it's being the destruction of the mangroves, a lot of people are then, impacted because they cannot now rely on these resources. A lot of Maldivians, again, depend on agriculture as a source of income. And also, a lot of Maldivian families they have been self-sufficient in the history by having home gardens grown. But because of the sea surges and because of, again, the climate impact, this is not possible anymore. And a lot of, especially, and when I talk about this, I'm talking about a lot of women. Not when we look at men in the Maldives, it's mostly men working in the tourism industry. It's mostly men who are working in the fisheries industry. And so it's the women who stay back in their islands, who stay back with their families and work in these areas. So this is how livelihood has been impacted. When we look at other health and sexual reproductive rights of women and girls, there are some research that has been done in the Maldives that show because of the climate impact and because of what's happening, women are disproportionately impacted in terms of health, in terms of sexual reproductive health as well. The socioeconomic status or the situation in the Maldives is that the health sector is very much centrally developed, or rather we have to depend on the centrally focused services. And so people from the islands have to travel to the capital city in order for them to access to services, better health services as well. And so because of the change in weather, because of the weather and also because we have to depend a lot on transport as well, and because we are surrounded by sea, a lot of the women who need to access to these services immediately are, they face a lot of challenges, they face a lot of delays as well. It's also women and children who are, again, indirectly impacted when they have to relocate to other areas of the islands, when they have to relocate to or migrate to other islands. And so in all, even in the Maldives, the reality is that women and girls and children are disproportionately affected by climate change. There's a lot of chemical usage and fiberglass usage in the islands when it comes to boat building, boat yards, and other construction sites. When the islands are so small and people live in such a small area of the island, the use of these chemicals are very much impacted. There's a huge impact of the use of it. So these are some examples of how the climate change impact is in the Maldives. So what can the NHRIs do, or rather, what have we been doing? Again, the reality is that NHRIs, the human rights defenders, we are hardwired to think that when it comes to human rights violations, there has to be, a direct human perpetrator. Or rather, when we look at human rights violations and when we investigate cases, we always look at who has violated this person's right. And if there's no direct link to a perpetrator or someone who is causing this person to be in this situation, it's difficult for us to hold them accountable, or rather look into these cases. So NHRIs, as NHRIs, we need to grow, and we need to change our perspective on how we look into cases of human rights violations related to climate change. And so we are we need to improve our capacity. There's a huge scope and need for us to improve in that manner. Currently, I think, similar to any other NHRI, the Maldivian NHRI is also mostly focusing on monitoring at a systemic level. We do get some cases of fiberglass usage, beach erosion, people being impacted because of beach erosion, and but at a greater level, at a impactful level, what we are currently doing is the monitoring of how climate change is impacting on other rights, on a human rights perspective. We have been utilizing the regional and international forums as well. We are a part of the GANRI caucus on climate change and human rights. We have been for 2 years chairing the caucus. Our vice president was the chair of the caucus. And we have been able to discuss and have dialogues with international forums because of this intervention as well. We have done a research on the situation of how much of empirical evidence there is in the Maldives on the impact of climate change and human rights. We have, in this assessment, looked into the legislative and policy framework as well, to what extent it exists and to what extent it needs to be strengthened. We have developed and we have completed this assessment, but moving forward, we will be working with other UN agencies and other international bodies to mobilize resources for us to do extensive researches on this, for us to do extensive policy advocacy work as well. I think we have a lot of scope to work on the area. We have a lot of space and a lot of need. There's a huge need for us to do interventions. Right now, and yes, I forgot to mention that we also have in our shadow reporting and our reporting to the UN agencies, the UN treaty bodies, focused a lot on climate change and the impact on human rights. We have been able to utilize these treaty body mechanisms, and because of our advocacy, a lot of the concluding observations and the recommendations by the treaty bodies are now, it focuses a lot on climate change and what the country can do to strengthen this issue. It is crucial to integrate a gender-responsive approach to the conservation efforts of climate change. And so it is our priority as well as an NHRI to look into this aspect of how women and children are impacted by climate change. Education and empowering women builds resilient communities in a country that is impacted by climate change on a significant level. And so we are working with UNDP and UN agencies as well on empowering and creating awareness on climate change and how to build a resilient community. That we also acknowledge the importance of social protection to promote climate resilient behaviors. And so social protection in terms of benefits that are given by the state, cash and in-kind benefits when it comes to response. We also as a nation need to strengthen our legislative framework, our policy framework to address loss and damage as well, because currently the awareness of it, people, how much people know on what avenues to exhaust at the national level, it's very low. The national mechanisms that are set up for loss and damage is also very low. And so not a lot of people are aware that climate change has a direct impact on human rights, and there is a huge need for loss and damage compensation as well.
Thank you very much for that very comprehensive description of what's happening in Maldives in terms of climate change impacts. We sit here in the mountains in Nepal, and for us, Maldives is a very nice touristic destination. A lot of Nepalese go there, and others as well. But then, what you're talking about is real impacts in a land where 80% is less than 1 meter in elevation, and there's multiple impacts where we talk about wetlands or fisheries or tourism, coral reef bleaching, and so on, and also the impacts on women. And also thank you for the role that NHRI is doing there on monitoring, advocacy, research, and also education and empowerment of women. That's great to hear. Now let's move on to Nepal. I said earlier that Chure region, which is basically just north of the Gangetic Plain. The Gangetic Plains kind of extends into Nepal. And although the Gangetic Plain is a small strip of land in southern Nepal, that strip of land hosts about 50%, more than 50% of the Nepalese population. So although we say that Nepal is a mountainous country, more than 50% actually lives in the plains. And right north of that is this small strip of, well, strip of hills called the Chure Range, which is very important for the livelihoods of people living in Chure as well as south of Chure as well as all of Nepal. But it's also a range that is very young and fragile and also very sensitive when it comes to climate change. So what I want to ask Srijana Shrestha is, what is your program doing? And this is very interesting, because this program is called the President Chure Conservation Development Board, because it was started by the first Right Honorable President of Nepal, who recognized Chure as a very, very vulnerable region and the need to do something. So that recognition from the highest institution within Nepal was very important to shed some limelight on this issue. So maybe you can talk a little bit about what's happening in Chure, particularly when it comes to women and children, and also what your organization is doing there.
Okay, thank you for the question. First of all, I would like to repeat your word that related to the climate change, that it have the affect all the people, but it's gender-wise and socioeconomic, it has differential impact, no? I relate this climate change impact with the return Chure problem also. Here, our two colleagues has also mentioned about the climate change impact on their countries also. Here, I also want to say that while we are talking about the impact of climate change on women and girls, we have to, first of all, analyze the sectoral impact of climate change. For example, how forests are impacted by climate, how energy sectors are impacted by climate change, how water sectors are impacted by climate change. Then we can relate how it cause effect on the women and children. I want to give two examples that if, because of the climate change, due to the erratic rainfalls, that changes in the rainfall patterns cause the water security scarcity, and that leads the women and girls take a lot of time to collect the water. They have to spend their almost hours to collect the water. And similarly in the forest sector, in agriculture sector also, there's a loss of biodiversity. And women and girls, indigenous peoples who depend on the forest resource, non-timber forest product collection, for example, mushroom, wild mushroom, they have to spend a lot of time nowadays. In the past years, we used to find them in a nearby forest, but nowadays it's take a time. Their ability of theirs is also decreasing, and also now still we are in the age of different energy, we using energy for the cooking and like that, but still there are the women and girls who have to collect the fuel wood also for the energy. Now I would like to join this, link this problem, the Chure also. Mainly the Chure concept, Chure is the most important area, most important landscape, Bhavar, which is in which when the rainfalls happen, then percolate the water into the underground, and it is called a recharge zone. It is also rich in biodiversity also, and but also fragile land also. And we have to sometime face forest fire as an epidemic, pandemic also in the Chure area. And regarding there are lots of problems we have to address, but major intervention that our organization are intervening, are implementing are, we are managing the wetlands, we are the artificial recharge ponds, and also we are protecting the river bank where floods came and agricultural lands are driven by the flood, and we have to face the loss of the agricultural crops, which ultimately create the food scarcity in the future. And if we do not work on that Chure area, it also bring a problem of water scarcity in the Tarai landscape, because it's Chure Bhavar is a zone important for to recharge the water, and which we can use in the Tarai zone by digging a well, or we can use the underground water. And another part, we are also implementing a program of plantations and making check dams, gully erosion control, control, agroforestry, like that. There are some major programs we are going on. I would not like to list it all there here. And the sir also mentioned that a number of women are come here in Kathmandu. One of the most slogans is that they are asking water from here. Save, conserve today and give us the water in the Tarai, because we are suffering a lot. We have to walk a lot of distance to face the water. While linking with the gender, mostly in different sectors there are various impact context situations are different, but women has to suffer the time poverty, and they have to suffer of the workload burden, and they have to suffer not taking care of their own because of that time scarcity. So as we talk about disaster sector also, that some of the major disaster in Nepal is landslide, flood, you also mentioned forest fire. These also in the Chure area also, there are also problem of this disaster. And disaster can lead us to the gender violence and other like that. We are impacted, girls and women are impacted to that. After disaster, we have to face a lot of that problem. So we can, one thing is that I always feel that while we are talking about the gender and these things, always we have to convince the most of the people that we are severely affected. We are differently, disproportionately affected by these things. No, still we have to convince them. No one easily accepts these things. So that gender, women's and girls are affected mostly due to the climate change. We have to focus these things. We have to integrate these things in our program. Although we are doing a lots of conservation activity in Chure also, I still feel that still we have not sufficiently integrated that thing in our program. Still we are working through the community user groups. We also say about the women participation leadership, but still we have to do a lot of effort to integrate that things so vibrantly and so effectively to address the issue of these things and include them or increase their participation in the actions so that we are implementing in the field of conservation.
Thank you. So what you're basically saying is that yes, there's been a lot of efforts in terms of conservation, particularly things like managing wetlands, plantations, check dams, and etc. But there is a challenge to convince, say, senior people or politicians to integrate gender issues into this and prioritize gender issues. And this is happening in Chure as well, although we all know that this impacts women more. Okay, we're running out of time. We did start a little bit late, so I'll take that privilege to go a little bit more time. But we do have to take some questions from the audience, if there are any, and I see our hand raising immediately. So can you please help? There's one, the first hand that raised up was in the middle. And then I'll take a question from the back, and then I'll take a question from the front. So that's it, 3 questions. 4, okay. We don't have much time, so we will, the panelists will be here, and I'm sure that you can have.
Good morning, and of course, assalamu alaikum again to everyone. Listening to the presentations of all of our honorable speakers this morning, they've all spoke about the effect of climate change in their respective countries, particular to women and children. I'd like to share to all of you that the Philippines NHRI has actually proposed this. I've presented it to the CNF last year, and our chairperson, Pal Palatok, has presented it to several international audiences as well. We have a proposal on a regional NHRI mechanism to discuss and hopefully tackle the problem on climate change, especially within our region, wherein most of us are the least contributor to this very critical issue that we are facing globally. My question is to all of the speakers, or any one of you probably, what are your insight or thought on this proposal that the Philippines has proposed to our other fellow NHRIs. Thank you very much. And if there's anybody interested on this proposal, please reach out to us and we will be happy to discuss this with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Philippines proposing a regional NHRI mechanism to address the issue of climate justice. So if there's any response from particularly the two honorable members of NHRIs here, we'll get to that. If there's a question to the end, I know there was a lot of hands raised at the end, but I will give I can't see from here, my eyes are pretty weak, but someone from there, but then someone already has a mic here, so we'll take that, and then please take the mic to the end, and the person raising the hand over there. But here, please.
Thank you. Good morning for everybody. My name is Rashid Al-Balushi. I'm coming from Oman, which is a bit far from this area. First of all, I would like to extend my sincere and gratitude to Nepali National Human Rights Commission for the hospitality and also the good organized for this conference. Actually, I think we need to look. Yes, I think we need. I agree with you when you said we need to see the positive side. Women not always victim also for these things. Women, I think we are in Oman since 2006. Because we are in the coast of the Indian Ocean and also the Arabian Sea. We got from that time more cyclone and more disaster regarding the climate change. So we note that there is very positive what's called activities happen with the women in our area also. Okay, there is some damage happened, but I think we need to concentrate as Human Rights Commission to how help the women in this situation and to secure the social services and social help as mentioned by Moldavia during this time. But also we no need to ignore also the positive action which play by the women in that time. So I don't know whether the panelists agree with me for this one. We need to concentrate also how to help those those people who need our service in that time. The procedure, how to reach them, how to help them, how to secure, as I mentioned, social benefits for them. So this is my question and this is my idea. I will be happy to discuss it with the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we need to both support women who need support, but at that same time acknowledge the leadership, the good work that women is doing, and provide incentives so that they can do further as well. I think we'll all agree to that. Then I'll go to that question way at the end.
Hello. This is Kiran Kumar Brahm from the National Human Rights Commission of the Nepal. I want to first of one question to the commissioner from the Indonesia. As you mentioned in your presentation, you have received the complaint in regarding to the climate change. It is quite interesting for us. So I have a question. Can you brief about the settle of this complaint? Who is responsible for it? It either government or others, community? This question for Indonesian Commission. Another two questions is related to the Commission from the Maldives and Commission from the Indonesia. What are the NHRI role, your NHRI role to formulate the National Action Plan for the climate change and the NDC, National Determined Contribution, and its implementation too? Third question is both of you. How can we work together for the climate change and human right? Most of the government done lots of things, but the role of the NHRI in this region is very least. So how can we work together for the climate change and human right for the vulnerability community? Thank you.
Thank you, Kiranji. I was expecting one question. I get three. That shows your commitment and your interest in this topic. Your hand has been going up and for many times, so I'll take one more question, although I said three. Yes, right here.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank all the panelists. My question is in general. I'm talking about the sea level rise. Sea level rise is considered the worst climate disaster that the Pacific area, regions, Maldives, Indonesia, and other islands could be faced. So my question, has the government taken measures to protect the people and save the people from this disaster or not? Thank you.
Okay, sea level rise. Has the government taken certain measures to protect the people from sea level rise, particularly in Maldives? I'd say this is a major issue, of course, in Indonesia as well. We don't have this issue in Nepal, so I'll let the two honorable commissioners address these questions. So I'll stop the questions for now, and I'll request my panelists, if there are questions, can you please respond to them? So first, Honorable Commissioner from Indonesia, Putu Elvina.
Thank you very much for the input, and then it's very good input from Philippines. And of course, we agreed about the proposal. I think we all agreed for a better proposal regarding this issue about the climate change. And of course, maybe we can make several meetings regarding this proposal and hope that all NHRs can adopt this kind of proposal as well. Thank you, Oman. Of course, we need support to help women and children and girls regarding the climate change. Every effort will make us face a better situation when a disaster happens. And of course, there are several strategies to help these women and girls regarding the climate change and how to minimize the impact to them. Of course, the biggest issue is about regulation. And then the second one is how the regulation can be implemented. And of course, the support of stakeholders, yeah, from civil, from government, and then from corporate is very meaningful if they can support this situation. Because regarding the vulnerability of the women and children and girls, there are several unconditioned situation that need help. So I think different countries have different strategies to adopt the situation. From Nepal, regarding the complaint system, yes, Komnas HAM have a mandate to receive complaints. After a complaint received, we take a note to analyze what kind of the complaint. Regarding the complaint about the climate change, usually complaints come from activists from a human rights defender. And once the complaint is, we analyze, we then make decision whether this person who seek Komnas HAM statement regarding the human rights defender or not, because Komnas HAM can say that someone is human rights defender or not, something like this. So once we agreed that the complaint or the activist is one of the human rights defender, we make several adjustments, we make the several advocating, we then issued some kind of letter of protection, etc. And is it regarding the systemic or administrative? I think we can talk about this later on. And then, yes, we have to take measures how to protect people of the impact of the climate change. This kind of measures, sometimes women and girls are not involved in this, how to make the planning, how to make the program. The involvement of women and girls is important because without inclusion in their involvement, it is very difficult to make a program, or government is very difficult because usually they don't understand what special needs women and girls won, yeah, in the disasters condition. So I think we have to take a measure, special measure, of course, how to protect the people of the impact of the climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to Commissioner from Maldives, because there were quite a few questions for you as well.
Yes. So the first question was by Commissioner Faida from Philippines. Her proposal, or rather the Philippines' proposal on having a regional mechanism for NHRIs to discuss climate change and human rights. I fully agree that it will be an impactful and a significant way forward. As I've mentioned earlier, the Human Rights Commission of Maldives has been a part of the caucus of the GANRI Climate Change and Human Rights Caucus. We've been the chair, and we have seen the impact. We have seen the work that we can do together, and how much the discussions are fruitful. And we have been, through the caucus, able to organize a few regional, global level programs as well. Some awareness and sensitization forums were held as well. And so I think at the Asia Pacific region, it would be very effective that if we had a mechanism at the regional level as well, because at the Asia Pacific region, we have more similar impacts and similar implications of climate change. And so we are at a unique level where the small island nations are all together. Even in this very room, we have a lot of small island nations that are impacted by climate change, and also the other nations such as Indonesia and even Philippines. And so I think that it will be very helpful. The NHRI's role, one other question was, what's the NHRI's role on the drafting and development of action plans? I would say the Human Rights Commission of the Maldives has been able to be a part of the national level planning that happens in the Maldives. But again, the sad reality is not every recommendation or not all of our advice or opinion is then incorporated. One of our recommendations for the recent at the recent drafting stage of the climate change bill for the Maldives was that a lot of emphasis needs to be given for climate resilience in the legislation. And so yes, we have been a part of drafting, and that is something all NHRIs can actually do to have a to be able to contribute at a concrete level. Women, yes, I agreed with the commissioner from Oman. Women are not just victims. Women should be at the forefront, working on adaptation, mitigation, and women should also be compensated, and also through social protection they should be assisted would be not the best word to use, but I would say social protection should be planned in a way that climate change can also be addressed through the social protection mechanisms of a country, because currently social protection is also only majorly focused on other vulnerabilities. Sea level rise and what states have done, I would say that it's not, climate change is not, the issue of climate change cannot only be addressed by actions taken by one single country. The world, we have globally, all nations we've actually failed at the level of mitigation. We've failed at mitigation. So we are at the level of adaptation and loss and damage now. So at this point in time, even in the Maldives, things that can be done are adaptation measures. The beach erosion happening is impacting, as I said, a lot of people, and there living. And so relocating people and other measures such as low carbon emission and also acquiring funding from international bodies as well to fund for the adaptation measures. And so sea level has risen. There's nothing we can do about it anymore. There's only adaptation that we can work on.
Thank you. There weren't particular questions addressed to you, but if you would like to address any of the questions, please.
Thank you. Not exactly the question that are coming, I think, that are not related to Nepal, but I want to mention two more things here. Previously, we were focused in the tourist conservation area. Now, I want to focus on the climate change in national level. Although we have tried to integrate gender in the climate change through sectoral policies, strategies, programs, we have a national climate change policy that also spell about integrate the gender, and we have a national adaptation plan. There are also some of the projects related to the gender, and we have national determined contributions. There are lots of policy and programs, and mostly we have a JC and climate change strategic action plans in place. But I feel that this action plan has spelled about the gender integration in different sectors, 8 thematic and 4 cross-cutting, cross-thematic sector as for the National Climate Change Policy of Nepal. That's a fact. And I just missed that. What I would like to suggest, not to miss that, if I'm not from the NHRI, but I want to suggest, I feel that what NHRI should do from my perspective is feel that it will be good if they advocate, they encourage the stakeholder at national level, international, local level to integrate the gender, not only in the community level, not only in the implementation, also in the institutional level. The people who are working in the institutional levels and who are doing integrating that gender in the policy and plan, still we have to fight over these things in this place also. It's not easy to integrate or not easy to include the provision of gender in these policies and action plans and program. There is also difficulty. So we have to focus at community level, field level, implementation level, where we have the front line, impacted at the front line also. But we have to also ensure that things in the institutional level to open up our eyes, to sensitize us. So this is needed. We have to integrate this gender. The impact of climate change are going on disproportionately in the women and girls. At that thing, the NHRs can help. And another thing is that there are lots of negotiations. There are lots of international forum. We are advocating about the climate change issue. In that forum, nowadays we are raising the climate justice issue. You can help, or the organization can help us to create evidence and support that negotiation team in the international forum, so that climate justice can be established as a negotiation, one of the part in the theme of gender, IPs and local community, in that theme also, or we can put it here, others theme also, adaptation, mitigation, anywhere. But we have to support the team to negotiate, to be included in that negotiation, that thing, climate justice should be included there, and we have to, now it's time to think about it.
Thank you. In fact, you have stolen my last question. The last question to the panel was actually the first question that the Honorable Chair had raised. He wanted from the panel at least one suggestion on what NHRIs could do and or how we could work together. So since you've already answered that, I will go to the next two panelists. So to summarize the panel discussion, I want to bring this to a close. Your final remarks, particularly addressing our chair's question on one suggestion on what NHRIs should do or prioritize.
Thank you. Yes, answering the chairs, I think the role of NHRI is very significant according to the mandates. And of course, strengthening the advocacy, public campaign, and networking with all parties is the answer of how we can mitigating the climate change. We agreed that women and girls are the most vulnerable regarding the climate change. So I think the development carried out by the government, and then all stakeholders must involve women in goals in an inclusive manner, starting from planning and then to the implementation of development policies and program. Nothing about us is without us. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to Honorable Shafat, please.
Yes, Commissioner Putu has very rightfully said that women and girls, women and children are not part of the discussions when it comes to climate change and environment-related plans and policies. Even in the Maldives, there's a research that shows that 80% of the participants, that is including men and women, actually believe that there is no significant level of women participation in the formulation of climate change, disaster risk reduction actions and management and planning and policies. And so this is the root cause of it. As Commissioner Putu has said, gender inclusion and gender-centric planning cannot be done if women are not a part of it. And so there lies where the NHRIs can come in. Climate change is seen as a very isolated area that is not at all related to human rights. The NHRIs, what we can do is we can create awareness that climate change is very much related to every single individual other right. Climate change itself, or climate justice and climate, it's not just one right. It's not one isolated, standalone area, but it has an impact interrelated to every other right. Right to health, right to education, right to employment, right to a decent living, right to life. And so NHRIs need to create this awareness at the policy level. And also, while doing so, include women in that discussion so that a gender-centric approach, a gender-centric lens would come in. And also the intersectionality of gender as well, because every individual woman is impacted at a different level, at a different, in a different way. So yes, I think, and we have very good examples such as the Philippines and Indonesia, where they have done national inquiries and public inquiries on the impact of climate change, and these are interventions that other NHRIs can also adopt. And also the utilization of UN treaty bodies as well, so that it's not just the NHRI's recommendations, it's also the treaty bodies that are recommending to the states that these measures should be implemented.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just saw you pick up your mic. Do you want to add anything? Yes, please.
Yeah, just two things I want to add, that always we should not forget to see from the intersectionality lens while we are doing gender integration in different sector. And another thing is that we have to always think, analyze from the perspective of situational vulnerability and historical vulnerability also, because while we are talking about the climate change, these things is very important for us to contribute in policy or to implement in actions or implement a policy. So while implementing the climate change action, either is adaptations, either is mitigation that integrates gender, we have to always we should have a lens of intersectionality, and this historical and situational, contextual vulnerability should be there in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This has indeed been a great session. I'd like to thank my panelists, Honorable Putu Elvina from Indonesia, Honorable Aminah Shafat from Maldives, and Ms. Srijana Shrestha from Nepal. It's been a learning experience. We talked quite a bit of detail into climate change, its impacts, role of women, how women are being impacted, but also what women are doing and what human rights commissions in various countries are doing and what it should be. I do have one more question that came up, and I was told that please answer it. Please ask if you have the time, but I'm going to ask this to the chair as I hand over the mic to the chair. There was a question that came up that says climate change is happening. This is reality, but there's no doubt. However, prosperity is also equally important. To make the nation prosper, we need to invest in mega projects. While making such mega projects, there's a chance of being, violation of human rights and local people. How can we balance the protection of rights of people, local people, climate justice, and development? And I know our chair has been working on this for a long time. So I request Honorable Chairperson of this session, Professor Dr. Surya Dungel, to bring this session to a close with your remarks while addressing this question as well as other issues that may have come up. Thank you very much. And thank you for the audience for your active participation in the panel.
Thank you very much, Bhushanji. And first of all, I must congratulate the panelists and those participants who made comments and raised questions also for your excellent presentation and sharing of ideas and your experiences. So we must thank them with big applause to our panelists. Some of the very, very important matters, ideas have come up here and suggestions. I, as a chairperson, I think one of the roles of the chairperson, as a professor, we used to talk too much. As chairperson, I have learned that you have to be a very good listener. So I kept on listening, and it benefits me a lot, and I can really assimilate quite a number of issues that you have raised and suggestions given. So I would not speak much, but I would raise some of the issues which were really very useful for us to take away. All the three panelists, I won't name, who raised what, but I will come collectively so that because the matters and the issues and the ideas that came are actually the collective wealth of the whole exercises that we are doing now, and it's a collective takeaway also. One is the issue of national inquiry, actually very innovative ideas that Indonesia has experienced, and that have been doing. And we are also in Nepal are planning to have a national inquiry on women's issues, gender issues. That's one of the very, so NHRI could really administer national inquiries. And based on that, then it can recommend to the government and to the respective areas where it is needed, The second is the issue of human rights defenders. In the environmental sector, in the climate change sector, especially globally, most of the victims of violence, environmental violence and global violence, and the victims are mostly defenders. And environmental defenders are the most critically, they are the one who have been, many defenders have been killed. So how to really, on the one hand, the defenders, how to support and more strengthen and the position of defenders and make them more active on the one hand, and at the same time, how to look into the security of the defenders. The human rights, therefore, the proposed enactment that we are recently, we have submitted one nationally, where to review have our Human Rights Commission Act. We have one chapter, full chapter on the defenders chapters. One of the chapters that will deal with defenders, human rights defenders. And especially climate change defender is very, very crucial and very difficult, very risky. So the risk aspect also, I think the human rights defender issue came. And the third one, the issue, the Maldives, you raised, you mentioned about, it's good to hear that, Maldives is going to chair the caucus. The caucus could have actually a very good forum, and that Maldives is going to chair, you mentioned, right, very soon. And the caucus is actually one of the international, it could be local forum also, if we can think about curating caucus, as we have in political caucus in parliament, the caucus for human rights and environment and climate change issues. This could be another actually area where I think we can think about. And basically the role of NHRIs. And we have seen national role, regional role, and international role, as the Ghanari is also playing globally, linking the whole human rights and climate change issue with the COP, with the regional interactions, as well as national interactions. We have a role of NHRI are very, very crucial in order to bridge, on the one hand, to encourage the local civil society and local stakeholders, and bridge the gap between the government and parliament. And I think NHRI could play a very important role as the bridging, in order to bridge the gaps between various stakeholders and institutions, in order to be more, and advocacy. We talk about advocacy. Advocacy is important, and that's where the NHRI could work together with civil society groups. And it is actually there, they could be very good instrument, in order to work together and really advocate, on various national and other issues, including climate change. One of the things that I think mentioned, with the came was involvement of women right from the beginning in the planning process. That is very, very important, that issue came up. We have to not only at the outset, but from outset until the enforcement. During the enforcement also, the women's role must be considered and given very high importance. That's also one of the issues that was raised, and very important. I think we have to consider, because the women's, because one of the reports of ICIMOD that was prepared in cooperation with UNDP, UNEP, and others, Nepal's report. We have one provision, very good dynamic, amendment of laws, but law enforcement is a problem that also came up here. Enforcement of regulation, and we have there in the law that women will be involved in the planning and adaptation process, preparing action plans, but they are not given, they are given small roles, but the decision-making role of women is lacking, and that's the report of ICIMOD we have read. So in the climate change issue, which is a very critical issue, which requires a lot of knowledge, sharing experiences, and good practices also from various countries. And I think we talk about the involvement, participation of women and its impact. We all talked on women and girl child, or even indigenous community and vulnerable groups. Actually, their role and their participation and their role in the decision-making process has to be meaningful, not just for window dressing, In order to make their role very meaningful, they have to be really given a decision-making and leadership role also. So I think with these words, one of the things that that didn't come here for discussion was, we didn't talk about judiciary's role in the process. In Nepal, judiciary has played a very good role in preserving and facilitating the environment protection aspect, right? And even the cultural heritage. The judiciary also should be, as one of the stakeholders, as also, a beacon, it's a lead role it can play in giving the guidance and instruction to the government, also in order to carry out so many important roles there. The court's role. And the second thing, I saw in the General Assembly and Human Rights Council resolution, why not to think about, there is a proposal which I just want to float here. There is a proposal that why not we, since climate change is such a vast and global and transboundary and international issue, why not we consider to have a special administration of justice for addressing the issues of climate change like transitional justice. So there's a prosecutory role, rehabilitative role, reparatory role, and informative role. So there are transitional justice has different roles, like and truth-seeking role. So who is the culprit of violation of really cause of really climate destruction? So we have this. It's a very important issue, and which has been written by several authors also. I read a book by Eric Pulley, which is Climate War, the Climate War, in which he has mentioned there has been always a blame that, it's a climate issue is not it's not caused by human factor, Human beings are not responsible for climate change. But now, the carbon emission issue, which is the primary cause of climate change and the climate destruction, so it's the cause, the human are the key factors. And we have to, since we are the problem, we have to find the solution. With these words, I'd like to thank you again, and since it's the last session, for your patience. And I think you must have come from different parts of the world, and some colleagues that we have been meeting. And I must congratulate Qatar initially, because the interaction between GANARI, National Institution, and climate justice, the issue of human rights and climate, it was actually globally initiated by Douala, actually in February. Thank you very much, and Nepal was lucky to participate in that. And with these words, I must thank moderator. Actually, it's a very good, he did a very good job, and his job was, actually how to get our scholarly panelists share their ideas, come up with new ideas, and really, and give a final opinion as to how can we work together. With these words, I'd like to conclude my views also. Probably I spoke a little bit more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, all the speakers, for guiding us through this critical issue on climate change and gender justice. Now, to express our gratitude, we'd like to offer a token of appreciation to our esteemed speakers. I request the chair of this session, Honorable Dr. Dhungel, to offer this gesture to our panelist and facilitator. I invite the chairperson of NHRC Nepal to offer a token of appreciation to the session chair, Honorable Dr. Dhungel.
Actually, before my chair, hands over this, token of love to me, I like to share one information. National Human Rights Commission is planning in 2025 April to have one international conference on climate justice, environment, and human rights. So we'd like to actually please consider this as an open invitation to book your time, and we'll be in touch, we'll remain in touch, and National Human Rights Institution here will again try to share, creative forum on exclusively on climate justice and human rights. Thank you very much. We'll be working together with Mr. Bhushan Tuladhar also.